The sun of Caldera beat down mercilessly, its amber light reflecting off the cracked earth in shimmering waves. Talia pressed her slender form against the shadow of the water depot's outer wall, her violet skin darkened with dust and desperation. Her four-fingered hands trembled as she waited for the guard to complete his rounds. 3 days without water. Her family's ration cards had been misplaced by the Vrax authorities, again. A convenient oversight that happened frequently to families who couldn't afford the unofficial taxes demanded by Commander Krell's enforcers. Just enough to survive, she whispered to herself, touching the small flask hidden in the folds of her garment. Just enough until the next distribution. When the hulking guard passed around the corner, Talia slipped through the maintenance hatch, a secret entrance known only to the depot workers and those desperate enough to learn such things. Inside, the cool air carried the precious scent of moisture. Rows of gleaming tanks lined the walls, each containing more water than her family had seen in months. With practiced movements, she connected her flask to the smallest outlet valve and turned it carefully. The sight of clear water flowing into her container made her throat ache with thirst, but she resisted the urge to drink immediately. Her younger siblings needed it more. The flask was barely half full when the alarm shrieked. "Thief!" The booming voice of a Vrax guard echoed through the chamber. "Water thief!" Talia yanked her flask free and ran, but the exit was already blocked by another guard. She turned, searching frantically for another way out, but strong hands seized her shoulders, claws digging painfully into her skin. "Commander Krell will enjoy this," the guard hissed, his reptilian face splitting into what passed for a smile among the Vrax. "It's been too long since a public punishment." The town square filled quickly with onlookers, some drawn by the commotion, others forced to attend by the Vrax enforcers. Public punishments were mandatory viewing, object lessons in the consequences of defiance. Talia knelt on the stone platform, her wrists bound before her. The small flask of water had been placed mockingly just out of reach, its contents evaporating slowly in the heat. Commander Krell himself presided, his massive frame adorned with the metallic badges and water jewels that signified his rank. "The law is clear," he announced, his voice amplified to reach the farthest corners of the square. "Water theft is punishable by dismemberment, for a first offense, 1 limb." A murmur ran through the crowd. Beside Krell stood the executioner, a specialized enforcer with a ceremonial blade designed to cauterize as it cut. Quick, but not merciful. "Does the thief speak in her defense?" Krell asked, fulfilling the ritual of justice without any expectation of reprieve. Talia raised her eyes, dust caking her cracked lips. "My siblings are thirsty," she said simply. Krell's laugh was like stones grinding together. "Then they should work harder for their rations. The Imperium rewards loyalty and industry." He gestured to the executioner. "Proceed." The blade glinted in the harsh sunlight as the executioner approached. Talia closed her eyes, bracing for the pain that would end her life as she knew it. In the silence, she could hear the soft sobs of her mother somewhere in the crowd. "Stop." A single word, spoken not loudly but with such authority that the executioner hesitated. The crowd parted as a figure strode forward, tall, broad-shouldered, and unmistakably human. His dark skin was weathered by the sun, and his eyes, a startling blue against his tanned face, fixed on Commander Krell with fearless intensity. "This punishment is excessive," the human said, stepping onto the platform. "I'll pay her water debt." Krell's surprise gave way to amusement. "Darius Mason, the human mercenary, this is not your concern." "I'm making it my concern." Darius positioned himself between Talia and the executioner. "Name your price, Krell." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Some things cannot be purchased, human. The law demands blood." "Then take mine instead," Darius said, extending his arm. "But the girl walks free." A tense silence fell over the square. Talia stared up at the human's back, wondering what kind of man would risk himself for a stranger, and what would happen next in this dangerous game of defiance. Commander Krell's laughter echoed across the square, a harsh sound that made several onlookers flinch. "You humans and your misplaced heroism," he said, circling Darius with predatory interest. "What makes you think I would accept such an offer? The girl broke our laws." Darius remained unmoved, his stance casual yet alert. "Because you're not just interested in punishment, Krell, you want entertainment." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. The Vrak's commander's head frills flared slightly, a sign of intrigue among his species. "Go on," Krell said. "The trial of endurance," Darius replied. "I undergo it in her place." The crowd's reaction was immediate, gasps and whispered conversations. The trial was notorious, a grueling test few survived, much less volunteered for. "You would risk the trial for this," Krell gestured dismissively at Talia, who knelt, wide-eyed and disbelieving. "A girl you don't even know." "I know enough," Darius said. "I know your laws permit substitution of punishment through the trial, and I know you haven't had a good show in months." Krell's inner eyelids flickered rapidly as he considered. Public morale had been low, and a human attempting the trial would bring prestige to his rule. "Very well," he finally announced. "The human Darius Mason will undergo the trial of endurance at dawn tomorrow. If he succeeds, the water thief goes free. If he fails—" Krell's lipless mouth curved upward. "We execute them both." As guards led Talia away, not to the execution block, but to a holding cell, her eyes locked with Darius's. "Why?" she managed to whisper as she passed him. He didn't answer, but something in his gaze suggested this wasn't the first time he'd stood against injustice. Later, in a shabby room at the settlement's only inn, Darius was surprised by a visitor, an elderly alien with faded purple skin and a slight stoop. "I am Naren," she said, "Talia's grandmother. I've come to ask why you would risk the trial for my granddaughter." Darius continued checking his equipment, a ritual before any dangerous undertaking. Simple decency isn't reason enough. "Not on Caldera," Naren replied. "Not anymore." Darius paused, studying the old woman. "I've seen too many worlds where the powerful crush the desperate for simply trying to survive. Sometimes a line has to be drawn." Naren nodded slowly. "They say no outsider has survived the trial in 15 cycles. "Then it's time that changed," Darius said, offering her water from his own ration, a gesture of profound respect on this parched world. As night fell, word of the humans' challenge spread through the settlement. Some called him a fool, others something far more dangerous, a symbol. Dawn broke over the Calderan desert in shades of burnt orange and crimson. At the edge of the settlement, a crowd gathered around a marked area where 6 towering posts formed a circle. Between them, stretched tight, were barriers of transparent material, not to keep contestants in, but to ensure spectators could witness every moment of suffering. Darius stood at the entrance, stripped to the waist. Ritual markings had been painted on his skin, symbols of the trial that would activate the neural monitors embedded in the arena's floor. Commander Krell addressed the crowd. "The trial of endurance tests not just physical strength but will. The human will face increasing heat, simulated combat, and most mercifully minimal water." He gestured to a tiny container suspended in the center. "Enough for perhaps one small sip every 8 hours. The trial ends when he surrenders, or when his body does." As Darius stepped into the arena, the barriers sealed behind him. Immediately, the temperature rose. The first hours tested endurance against heat alone. Darius conserved his energy, moving only when necessary, controlling his breathing to minimize moisture loss. When the first combat simulation activated, holographic Vrax warriors programmed to drain his energy through continuous engagement. He fought economically, using their momentum against them. By midday, his skin glistened with sweat that he couldn't afford to lose. The neural monitors beneath his feet recorded every vital sign, projecting them onto the barriers for the audience's entertainment. His body temperature, elevated but controlled. His heart rate, faster than normal but steady. His dehydration level, concerning but not yet critical. "He's stronger than he looks," muttered one of Krell's lieutenants. The commander watched impassively. Strength isn't the issue, it's what breaks first, body or spirit. As the sun reached its zenith, Darius finally approached the water container. The crowd fell silent. Every contestant faced this dilemma: drink now for immediate relief or wait and suffer longer to spread out the precious liquid. Darius took the smallest possible sip and returned to his position. In the holding cell, Talia could hear the commentary being broadcast throughout the settlement. Each time Darius overcame a new challenge, her hope grew, despite her family's warnings not to expect mercy from the Vrax. As afternoon waned into evening, the trial intensified. The holographic combatants became faster, more numerous. The heat pulsed in waves that distorted the air. Twice, Darius stumbled, Twice, he forced himself back up before the count that would end the trial. Why does he continue? Krell demanded, genuinely perplexed. He could surrender now and receive only minor punishment. In the arena, Darius fought not just external challenges but memories of another desert world, another community under a boot of oppression, another time he'd failed to stand up until it was too late. This time would be different. Night brought cold, the desert's cruel counterpoint to daytime heat. Hypothermia became as dangerous as dehydration. Still, Darius endured. By dawn of the second day, whispers spread through the settlement. No one had lasted this long in years. The human was still standing, still fighting. Something was changing in Caldera, not just in the arena, but in the hearts of those watching. 48 hours into the trial, Darius still stood. His body was weathered to its limits, skin burned and cracked, lips bleeding, muscles trembling with exhaustion, but his eyes remained clear and defiant. The crowd that had come expecting entertainment now watched in uneasy silence. This was beyond spectacle, it was becoming legend. Commander Krell paced anxiously behind the barrier. "Increase the difficulty," he ordered. "No human should be able to endure this long." "Sir," his lieutenant replied hesitantly, "we're already at maximum parameters. Any more would violate even our own standards for the trial." "Do it anyway," Krell hissed. In her cell, Talia listened to the broadcasts with growing concern. The commentator's tone had shifted from gleeful anticipation of failure to reluctant admiration. When the announcement came that Krell had ordered unprecedented difficulty levels, she made a decision. The guard outside her cell was young and inexperienced. When she collapsed, crying out about stomach pain, he momentarily panicked and entered, just long enough for her to slip past him and lock the door from the outside. Talia ran through back alleys, guided by her grandmother's instructions. A network of sympathizers had formed overnight, inspired by the human stand. At a nondescript dwelling, she found not just her family but a dozen others, the beginnings of resistance. "The human still fights," an old miner told her, "and not just for you now, for all of us." At the arena's edge, Naren approached the barrier, defying regulations that kept spectators at a distance. Her movement caught Darius's eye as he struggled against a simulation designed to drive him to his knees. "She is safe," Naren called out loud enough for him to hear. "Others are moving, you have given us courage." Something changed in Darius's expression, a new resolve lighting his exhausted features. He straightened, found his stance, and continued. Word spread through the settlement about Talia's escape, about the gathering resistance, about the human who would not break. Small acts of defiance multiplied. Water rations, accidentally, spilled near thirsty children, Vrak's orders quietly ignored, secret meetings in the night. Krell, sensing control slipping away, made his move. "The trial is corrupted," he announced. "The human has used illegal stimulants. Both he and the girl will be executed immediately." As guards moved to extract Darius from the arena, something unprecedented happened. The crowd surged forward, forming a barrier of bodies. "He passed the trial," someone shouted. "By your own laws, he's earned her freedom." Darius was half carried from the arena by supporters before Krell's guards could reach him. Hustled through the settlement's winding streets, he found himself in the same safe house as Talia. Their eyes met across the room, the alien girl and the human who had suffered for her. She approached him as others tended his wounds. "You didn't have to," she said simply. "Yes," he replied, his voice hoarse from thirst and exertion. "I did." That night, as Krell's forces searched the settlement, Talia and Darius found themselves alone in a small room. The connection between them, forged in crisis, tempered by sacrifice, deepened into something more intimate. Their differences seemed inconsequential against what united them, a thirst for justice, for freedom, for a better world. Their first kiss was tentative, gentle, a shared breath between two beings who had every reason to distrust each other's kind, yet found in each other something worth fighting for. Outside, the first skirmishes of rebellion began. Dawn broke over Caldera with the sound of conflict. Krell's enforcers moved through the settlement, weapons drawn, while citizens barricaded streets and created chokepoints to slow their advance. What had begun as one human stand for a stranger had ignited long-simmering resentment into open revolt. In the Resistance's makeshift headquarters, Darius reviewed their options with the growing council of leaders. His body still bore the marks of the trial, but 3 days of rest and care, much of it from Talia's hands, had restored his strength. "We can't win through direct confrontation," he explained. "The Vraks have superior weapons and training." "Then how?" asked one of the miners. "We can't go back to how things were." Darius unfolded a map of the settlement and surrounding terrain. "During the trial, the neural monitors gave me unexpected information. The sensors detected something deep below, a massive reservoir of groundwater that the Vraks monitors have been concealing." Talia leaned forward. "That's impossible. The drought has lasted for generations." "The drought is partly artificial," Darius explained. "The Vraks have been limiting access to the aquifer, creating dependency." Their planning was interrupted by an explosion that shook the building's foundation. Krell's final assault had begun. "We need to reach the control station at the water depot," Darius said. "From there, we can redirect the pumps to bring the reservoir to the surface." As the resistance fighters engaged Krell's forces in diversionary tactics, Darius, Talia, and a small team made their way through maintenance tunnels toward the depot. Their progress was slowed by patrols and security systems, but Talia's knowledge of the infrastructure, gained through years of work assignments, proved invaluable. At the central control room, they encountered Commander Krell himself, flanked by his most loyal guards. "I should have executed you both immediately," Krell snarled. "A mistake I won't repeat." The fight was brutal and quick. Darius's combat experience matched against Krell's natural strength and armor. Talia and the others handled the guards, using their smaller size and knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. When Darius finally subdued Krell, pinning him against the control panel, the commander laughed bitterly. "Kill me, and the Imperium sends 10 more like me." "We don't need to kill you," Darius replied. "We just need you to witness this." Talia activated the sequence they had prepared, overriding safety protocols and redirecting the deep pumps. Throughout the settlement, long-dormant fountains suddenly burst to life. Water, clean, abundant water, flowed freely for the first time in living memory. The fighting stopped as both sides witnessed the miracle. Krell's remaining forces, seeing their primary means of control evaporate, laid down their weapons. "Water isn't just survival here," Darius told Krell as the commander was secured. "It's freedom." In the days that followed, a new council was formed to manage the settlement and its newly discovered resources. Communications were established with other colonies, spreading word of both the uprising and the hidden reservoirs that might exist elsewhere. On the evening before Darius planned to leave to carry the spark of rebellion to other worlds under Vrak's control, he and Talia stood beside one of the new fountains. Their hands intertwined, her 4 fingers fitting perfectly between his 5. "You could stay," she suggested, her voice soft against the sound of flowing water. "Or you could come with me," he countered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "There are other worlds, other people needing what we started here." She smiled. A human and an alien fighting for justice across the stars sounds like a story worth telling. "It started with a theft," Darius mused. "A desperate act that changed everything." "No," Talia corrected him, leaning up to kiss him gently. "It started with mercy, with someone willing to stand when everyone else knelt." Around them, the settlement, no longer parched, no longer cowed, bustled with new purpose. Children played in shallow pools, their laughter a sound rarely heard before. Adults gathered without fear, planning a future suddenly rich with possibility. And in the heart of it all, 2 unlikely heroes found in each other something neither had expected. Not just passion or partnership, but home, wherever the struggle might take them next.